Building retuning training was conducted by Ron Underhill and Gupong Liu, scientists at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Classroom and on-site training for Maryland State Agency facility managers was conducted at Towson University in Towson, Maryland on June 17th through the 19th, 2014. This segment of training covers air handling units scheduling.
We're going to get started in the next section of retuning, identifying and correcting operational problems. And we're going to talk about air handler unit scheduling. Scheduling, and it doesn't have to be air handlers, but we'll just pick on air handlers. It could be rooftop units, it could be other things. Most BAS systems have the ability to schedule anything. Lights, set points, believe it or not, most BAS systems you can schedule set points. You can schedule terminal boxes to go into unoccupied mode. If you've got an air handler, it's got to run 24/7 because it's got people in the building and it's a VAV system and you've got terminal boxes. But you know you've got a significant part of that building that's not occupied. You can put a schedule on those terminal boxes that you don't normally expect to be occupied. A lot of terminal boxes have thermostats with a little button on them. And if they're programmed correctly, you can push that button and that particular box will go back into an occupied mode for 1-2 hours, however it's configured. So we've done this. Some other people we know have done this. VFD, again, if you don't need it, turn it off. If you don't need it at full capacity, turn it down. So how do I turn a VFD air handler system down? I program all the terminal boxes that I know will not be occupied or I don't expect to be occupied at night. Maybe it's from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's got a schedule. And then after 6 p.m., that box goes into an unoccupied mode. It'll go to its minimum or no flow condition. The fan will see that, oh, I don't have to deliver as much air because, oh man, I just saw a bunch of VAV boxes shut off. And it can relax its fan speed, still maintain static pressure, still maintain airflow, conditioned air to the spaces that need it. Like your body, you know, blood vessels open up, they constrict. So it's a great opportunity using scheduling. And if someone says, you know what, I want to come in and work over the weekend, they know if you've got a button, they can hit it. If you've got someone sitting at a 24/7 man terminal box, they can call up that guy and say, hey, I'm in my office. I need some ventilation. Please put my box back to an occupied mode. So that's one of many. You can schedule set points. It could be discharge temperature. It could be static pressure. Again, if I've got a VFD-driven fan and it's maintaining 1.5, 2 inches static pressure 24/7, but I know at night and on weekends and holidays, the number of occupants is going to go way down. Can I schedule that static pressure set point to go to half? And if I do, what's the impact going to be? Anybody ever done that?
Yeah, well, you have to have a certain amount to run your box, so
yeah.
It may not be half.
Yeah, it may not be half. The question is, you know, what do the boxes really need? What we found, a lot of boxes, you go to the vendor's website, they'll tell you I need 1/2 inch. Well, how do we get to 2 inches? Well, that's another story. But we see that a lot. Series fan-powered boxes are especially a huge opportunity for reducing static pressure because they got their own fan inside that's providing the amount of static pressure to take the air from the box out the ductwork, out the diffusers. And I could go into a lot of stories, but don't have time. So air handler unit scheduling. Again, based on the data that we collected, what does it tell us as far as how well that air handler is scheduled? Is it 24/7? Do we see hours of setback? Are the temperatures for the supply air higher or lower than we expect based on the trend data? Do we see if we've got excessive amount of ventilation, meaning the economizer? Do we have the economizer when the fan starts up at 4 in the morning or whatever time we start up because it takes 2, 3, 4 hours to get the space cooled back down or warmed up. So when we're doing that, is the economizer going back to minimum position, 20, 25%, 10%, whatever it is? Why are we ventilating the building on a morning warm-up or cool-down? I don't know, because I'm just focusing on getting the air handler started up. Yeah, you are. But if I don't close my outdoor air damper, which is, I don't need to ventilate the building if no one's in that building. Now I can close that, just recirculate the air, keep the outside air from coming in. If it's hot and humid like we're going to have here, and I'm bringing in 10, 20% of that air, I'm challenging my mechanical cooling system right out the gate. If it was cold like you had this winter, I'm challenging my heating system right out the gate. I don't need to. No one's in the building. I don't need to ventilate. So I can put a schedule on that minimum setting. Instead of having 10, 20% outdoor air, I can say go to 0. If I've got demand control ventilation, it'll do it automatically if it's configured properly. So a lot of things to think about for outdoor air intake. We'll talk about this more. Reheat during this heating, cooling season. Do we see the fan modulating? Static pressure higher than normal. Temperature set points. So a lot of opportunities. We're going to get into each and every one of these. So we want to enable the unoccupied mode. We want to see the fans shut off if possible. If not, we want to at least see the terminal boxes that aren't occupied shut off. Nights, weekends, holidays. Huge opportunity. It's the simplest thing to implement, and it's often not used effectively. Can we turn off the reheats? We'll talk about that later. I've had a lot of discussions during the break. I can't turn off my reheat, or we are, but we're having problems. So we'll talk about reheat a little bit later. Can we slow them down if I can't shut them off, like I just talked about? Can I change my static pressure set point? Can I do something at the terminal box level? Some areas that we would recommend, we see as challenges or opportunities: classrooms, conference rooms. This conference room, if it's got its own dedicated VAV box, can I put a schedule on this room? Auditoriums are notorious for running 24/7 or almost 24/7, yet rarely occupied. Why do we see that? Because on university campus, someone might want to use it, and we're running it just in case. Just in case. I don't know when they're going to have a big meeting in there, but just in case, I'm going to run it. So we're expending a lot of energy for spaces just in case. Okay? Now, I don't know how much just in case costs, because we don't sub-meter that level, but it's an opportunity. Well, so what are some of the things that I can do to work around that? Can I do a setback, but instead of letting it get up to 85 or down to 55, can I tighten it up, maybe let it get up to 75, 78, maybe down to 68 so that I can recover quickly when I need to? Does it have a VFD? Can I just schedule the static pressure set point to run at a much lower value so that I'm still running it, but at a reduced capacity, still maintaining the temperature, no one's in the space. Then when they go into space, put it back to normal ventilation's airflow parameters. Lighting, I don't want to pick on Towson, but we were here last night, and a lot of lights were on last night. And when I say last night, I'm talking the sun was still up. And so, again, lighting is a huge opportunity. Specialized exhaust systems, we see a lot of exhaust systems. Bathrooms, general exhaust systems running with no one in the building. So if I'm shutting off my regular air handling units, but my exhaust fans are running, what's that mean to my building? Negative. Whew, not good. Really cold outside, I don't want to be negative. Really hot and humid outside, I don't want to be negative. And especially if I'm going to do the other things we talked about on the previous slide, where I'm going to close my outside air damper when I'm starting up my fan. And if I'm running my exhaust fans at the same time that that's typical control sequence. As soon as the fan starts, interlock bathroom fans start. Real simple to program. But again, why am I ventilating exhaust, for a building that's not occupied? So now I'm pulling air out of the building, I got to make it up, which means I got to keep my minimum damper at some value, or I'm going to go negative, it's going to still come in. So again, exhaust systems, well, they're small motors. They might be fractional even. So why waste my time and energy? Because we don't want to go negative. That's why. Don't restart too early. Building needs, this is always a fun discussion. How many people use optimal start? Anybody use optimal start? Does it work? Sometimes.
The problem is a 3-day weekend.
What's that?
When you have a 3-day weekend or something, and if you take off your clients, then they suddenly don't want that to be used at all.
Yeah. Okay, and we talk. Recovery is a huge issue. Recovery. 3-day weekends, even 2-day weekends. Optimal start is a great starting point, but it's got some weaknesses, I'll just say that. But again, the alternative is if I don't use optimal start, I'm going to put my schedule for most of my systems at the earliest. I'm going to put it up for basically a design day. I'm going to say, you know what? If I started at 6 a.m., I may not recover. If I start at 5 a.m., I may not recover. We've seen some sites go as early as midnight. So they're shutting off at 6 p.m. and they're starting back up at midnight because that's their operating experiences. I'll never recover if I don't start early. And that might be true for certain outdoor conditions. So Optimal Start is a learning program, and it has some benefits, But optimal start, again, a lot of people say, you know what, optimal start, I got the phone rang. It didn't quite warm up or didn't quite cool down. Well, optimal start is designed to get your building close. And that's the fallacy of optimal start. Everyone says, no, it should be exactly at the occupied set point. That's what I was sold. That's what the vendor says it should do. And I'm going to tell you, they're not selling it properly. It should get you within 1 or 2 degrees, and that's it. And if people can't live with being in 1 or 2 degrees of set point, then you've got another issue. And that's why we have complaint-driven buildings. Because people expect it, you know, you told me it would be at this temperature, I'd be comfortable, and it's not there. So, and it could be further off than 1 or 2 degrees. So I'm just saying that's one of the challenges with optimal start. Again, don't bring in fresh air until 30 minutes before the occupied period. So how many of you have buildings where you tell people these are the hours of occupancy? Or do you just say it's always open? Whenever you want to use the building, it's always open. Because if you've got a building that's always open, and college campuses are notorious for that because it's a college campus, then you've got some other challenges. If you have buildings that you can say, you know what, maybe it's an admin building, it's not really for students, then can you set up a schedule and say these are the hours of occupancy? And on our campus, we have about 2 million square feet of buildings with multiple BASs for the National Department of Energy at our national lab. Our management has finally come to the conclusion, you know, we're just going to tell people 6 a.m., 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. Holidays, if you want to come and work on a holiday, you want to come and work on a weekend, at night, you want to stay after 6, come before 6, no problem. Come dressed appropriately. And it's taken about 5 years to change that culture. It's not going to happen overnight. Again, whenever possible, shut them down. If we keep starting up for occasional nighttime user, weekend user, we're never going to win the battle. Do we have override buttons like we talked about earlier? In some buildings, we have provided that for people. We generally put them in the lobby or some place that is public. They know, hey, if I go push it, I'm going to get 1 to 2 hours. It's real simple to program, real simple to add. It's what we would call a low cost. Again, it empowers people. People want to feel empowered. That's why we give them light switches. HVAC, a lot of people feel I'm not empowered. The only power I got is to take my phone and call and really complain. And the guys that are answering the phone call, they don't like that. And if I'm a facility manager and I'm being evaluated and graded on the comments that come back every year because we send out surveys, how did my building do? How did we do? Were you comfortable? Were you this? Were you that? I don't want a negative. So we're going to respond not to energy, but to how are you going to grade me? So that's why we say give people some of the things that really maybe they should have. Again, it's simple to implement, simple to track. Hopefully it's simple to administer. I don't know that I like this last bullet. Least paid employee is the most costly, and then they throw in janitors, or I don't like that. But that's just me. I think what I'd rather say is people can impact the cost of a building if they're in there doing whatever it is, whether it's janitorial, construction, and it could be just regular staff. So how do we manage that? And I'm not going to tell you how to manage that, but we're just saying we recognize those are issues that all of us deal with in facility operations. If I'm running at night, and when I say night, so we've got a schedule on a fan. Normally, and I've seen this, how many of you have BAS systems? If you go into night setback, does it have a low limit and an upper limit that will let the space either cool down to or warm up to? Hopefully everybody has that, right? Because a lot of BAS systems are configured and the control vendor doesn't put that. The capability is there, he just didn't program it in. So first time someone says, I'm going to put a schedule on this building, on the air handling systems, and it's really hot, and guess what? It really got hot in the building. The vending machines, the product baked, the chocolate bars melted. If it was really cold out and the building's negative, I actually froze some sprinkler pipe, and that's not good. That's my life safety system. Get rid of it. I'm getting rid of scheduling. So scheduling requires a little bit of thought by the people who are setting it up. And if it's based on temperature, how low do I let my buildings get down to? How warm do I let them go up to? Department of Defense is mandated 55 degrees and 85. What about the state? What do you guys generally let your buildings go down to?
55 degrees, it affects your building, especially if most of the government buildings are brick buildings and that. And you go down to 55 degrees, you're affecting your steel, and your expansion contraction. So I don't go below 60 degrees. I had the same problem with high structures in New York City when I was a little bit younger.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anybody else have any experience with letting buildings get too cold, too warm? What about here in the East Coast? How warm do you let your buildings get to in the summertime with all the humidity? Or do you even let them go set back in the summertime?
Mine's at
80.
80 degrees.
Okay. You know, so again, we talked about building personality. That's part of learning your building's personality is how low can I let it go before I have issues recovering, before I have issues with expansion, contraction, with mold, with all these things that you need to concern yourself with. And someone says, well, give me some guidelines. Tell me the numbers. I'm not going to tell you. You got to figure it out on your own. That's where you got to learn your building. That's where you got to start trending the data, listening to the occupant complaints, because every building's got a different envelope, different insulation values. Some are older buildings. Some are even newer buildings, but they were poorly insulated when they should have been very well insulated. The commissioning process, it fell on its face. We've got a brand new building. I say brand new, 10 years old now. And we went around with an infrared camera, found exterior walls with no insulation. How could that be? This is a brand new building. It was on the prints. It should have, you know, we had inspection, we had functional testing, we had this, we had that, commissioning. It happens, you know. So some of the things that we're doing, I don't recommend, but again, if I implement a schedule and I have an extremely cold weather event, like you had on the East Coast, you had several this winter, I think starting in January, and then you got away from it, then February, then you got away from it, then March, maybe even into April. You guys really got hammered with cold weather event throughout the winter, even into the spring. And people were freezing coils in their buildings because they didn't know how to manage coils in their air handlers. We were seeing that in Texas, in Georgia, even down into Florida, some of the places we've gone to and provided this training. And so some of those places were letting it get down to 55 degrees in their building because that's what they were told to do, even 60. And that's a great starting point. But with a BAS, you got an intelligent system. You can tell it to do other things as well. You can say, you know what, when I hit 30 degrees, when I hit 25, when I hit 20, whatever it is, outdoor conditions, that's what my building was designed for. All bets are off. I'm not going to recover, so I'm putting it back into a 24/7 occupied mode. That's real easy to program into a BAS. Same with the high side. A lot of people don't think about it. We do it all the time because if we don't, what's going to happen? My operator is going to go click, override, and it's going to run 24/7 because he's the guy getting the phone calls. And he knows how. He can do. He's a can-do person, and I can solve this. I just go click, override, and I'm not managing the BAS. I'm not there day to day. And all of a sudden, we look at the meter 3 months later, because that's how often we look at the meter, not weekly or whatever. How come the energy use for this building is so high? Oh, yeah, remember that weather event? Oh, we put everything in 24/7 override. Why don't you have your BAS automatically do it for you? So the operator doesn't have to worry about it, and then it will automatically take it out of that event and manage it for you. So that's something we would recommend if you're struggling with older buildings that are poorly insulated. You got HVAC systems that are poorly maintained, because that's your kind of building, then guess what? You're probably going to be running 24/7 in extreme weather. Some of the other things that we've done, a lot of this came from working down in Atlanta, which is further south. Warmer temperatures, higher humidities, VAV systems, but again, using the power of scheduling, drop the static pressure to 50% or half of normal at night. See if you can do it without affecting your reheat. And then schedule the boxes. Basically what they did is the interior boxes, they scheduled to go unoccupied with zero airflow, and they set up the perimeter boxes to get 100% airflow. Why did they set up the perimeter boxes? Because that's where the skin of the building is. That's where you're infiltrating potentially. If you can maintain the perimeter of your building, you're going to maintain the core. So we've done this a lot. In a lot of our buildings, we actually, with rooftop units, if you got smaller building with rooftop units and it's zoned, so you got perimeter zones and interior zones, we shut off the interior zones, we worry about the perimeter. And we'll even set the perimeter zones. If we're doing a setback and it's not a VAV system, we'll let them set back to maybe 68 degrees for wintertime and maybe up to 78 for summertime. And the other ones we just shut off. We see the perimeter boxes running a lot more at night, but we don't worry about the interior. So that's another opportunity or approach. So if I'm looking at my meter and I'm doing an aggressive scheduling on my HVAC systems, my lighting systems, we would generally want to see with an aggressive scheduling on your building 30% difference or as high as 50% difference from the base load to your peak load. So what's base load means what's going on at night and on weekends when everything's shut down. Do I see a 30 to 50% delta? If you're not, then we'd probably say there's some things on the table you need to go after and look for. Unless it's a special building, maybe it's a data center. Maybe you got a lot of computers and something like that, process loads. But generally, that's just a general number. If I'm trending data and I'm doing an aggressive setback, 5 to 10 degrees lower at night in my buildings in the wintertime, 5 to 10 degrees warmer in the summertime. The other thing we saw in a lot of buildings that we were doing retuning training on for GSA and DOD and others, we were seeing that their buildings were actually, in the wintertime, going 5 to 10 degrees high. Why? To your BAS, that's like, wow, I know my outside air sensor says it's 20 degrees, but it's like 80 to 85 degrees in the space. It must be 90 degrees outside. Pardon? Perimeter radiation will do that. But, and a lot of other things will do that. We're failing the heating valves and the air handlers if they're steam wide open to protect the coils. We've got a negative building. We're infiltrating air through those dampers, which aren't sealed up tight, into the building. We're pulling heat into the building. We've got perimeter loops running with 180 degree water. Yes, sir.
I'm kind of curious if representatives of the universities or the colleges here agree with that first bullet. Your building electric consumption will always show significant energy drop during the nights and the weekends. And the reason I'm kind of curious is because I know your students are out during the day for classes and various, I guess, sports and cultural activities, but in the nights and the weekends, I'm thinking they come back and they sort of kind of, congregate there. And I'm wondering if you're actually finding this or if you disagree with that statement.
I think it's a pretty good number. I think it could be more depending on the building. For example, like you mentioned earlier, administration. Administration building might be a little more, but some of the student buildings, I would say probably 30%, but we'd like to see 50%. I think that 30 to 50 is probably a pretty good number. That's what we see a lot, and we look at that number pretty closely here. I mean, it's obviously could always be better. I mean, we get frustrated when we see the heavier base loads with little to no occupancy.
Yeah, and let me clarify. I'll let you speak, but I'm going to just say for DOD sites with barracks, and I'm assuming we're talking housing as a big part of your portfolio on university campuses, those are almost 24/7. Students are in and out. They're eating, dressing, taking showers. So I don't think we're talking about housing.
No, I would say housing is obviously excluded from that because housing is heavier generally during the evening hours. But in your typical classroom building or administration building, we see probably that weekend activity, weekend drop or late night drop would be that 30 to 50%.
One of the things I had at Drexel University that they did was they put electric reheat in a lot of the professors' offices. And what was going on when we shut the main systems down, all the reheats would come on at night and their electric bills were going sky high because they had no control of their reheats from all the professors' offices and everything else. We saved them about $80,000 a year by just taking over the switches so we could cut them back on.
Yeah, great comments. Again, we coined a new term this winter. We called it baking your building because what we saw with perimeter hot water radiation and a lot of older buildings with steam, heat, poor controls, or just not configured very intelligently, was that we were seeing the trended data showing 5 to 10 degrees or higher temperatures trending up at night when it was 10 degrees outside. And in fact, so warm were the buildings that in the morning, not now a warm up, but an actual morning cool down, the outside air dampers were saying, oh, I got to open up, and then they were tripping on the freeze stats. Big problem and a huge opportunity, okay? So again, how do we manage some of these subsystems that might be related to the air handlers? Very important to think about and look at. Again, without the trended data, I'm not going to know. And if I'm only basing it on complaints, hey, people aren't going to complain if the building's too warm in the wintertime, generally. So I must be doing something right. Maybe, maybe not. Static pressures, if we're looking at static pressures and the trends, we want to see at least readings of 0 or close to 0 inches static pressure, which indicates the fan is shut off. If not, at least 50% or half of normal if it's running 24/7. Otherwise, if it's a constant 1.2, 1.5, 1 inch, whatever, it generally means, you know what, I'm running the fan as if it was fully loaded for a fully occupied building, nights and weekends. Statuses, if I'm looking at that, should indicate off for my fans. VAV boxes, if I have those types of data points, should indicate unoccupied during the unoccupied periods. And then all the ancillary support systems, again, what are we doing with all those systems at night? Do we continue to run reheat systems, hot water boilers, chillers, towers, pumps? If all my air handlers are down, why do I need chillers? Okay, I got a data center. Okay, I got to run it for that. Is that an opportunity to put a dedicated chiller or cooling system for that data center? Reheat systems, well, we got to run those because we don't want the building to get too cold and freeze. What's the temperature outside? It's 45. It's 50. You know, why do I need to? We're unoccupied emphasis is like your house. When you turn the thermostat off, you expect the house to cool down. When we turn the air handlers off, we expect the building to cool down. So if we're still running reheat, that means we're generating hot water. We got boilers, steam to hot water converters. We're still expending energy, and we're actually potentially warming the building up. So these are all opportunities. They got to be managed. And again, the first time I start after this, and if I freeze something in my building, well, there you go. That reheat system is going to be running 24/7. Because the amount of cost that I just lost in energy savings, I saved in energy savings, but I just expended to replace frozen sprinkler pipe. I had water leak. I had water damage. So this is very important to manage these ancillary systems, especially for cold weather. Anybody had any frozen coils in their buildings this winter? Was it spendy? It impacted your operations at the minimum. And all the energy savings, if you were trying to save energy from reducing set points and whatnot, scheduling things, you may have just lost in equipment replacement and the impact to your operations. So cold weather operations is huge. Got to know how to manage it. Which we don't talk about, but we can talk offline. Unoccupied periods, these are, again, we've talked about most of these, nights, weekends, holidays. It could be other periods of the time. If you've got, like we said, an auditorium, a conference room, and you have a motion-based sensor, then you may have a lot more than just nights and weekends where that space can be shut down. Sporadic uses. Make sure that you don't have the tail wagging the dog. Again, we've talked about extreme weather events, special events. So the last bullet there, how does your organization respond to occupant complaints? Is it a knee-jerk response? We're just going to run 24/7. Is it a Band-Aid or a long-term solution? Long-term solution may take a little more active systematic thinking to come up with something that's bulletproof. And that's what you want. You want something that is user-friendly, that protects your equipment and saves energy. So overrides are not long-term solutions. And how many of you manage or watch overrides on your BAS systems? And I would say, I'm not going to ask you to raise hands, but if you were my site, we constantly battle overrides. And overrides is a good thing. It's what the operator uses to take immediate corrective action. The question is, do they go back and correct the root cause, or is that the Band-Aid? And overrides are becoming the Band-Aid to a lot of things that have deeper problems. Again, do we empower occupants to control ventilation when they need it? If it's at night, do we give them an override switch, a button? Does your DDC system have that type of capability so they can override the scheduled shutoff? The second bullet here, the gray one, the last sentence there says Outlook scheduling. Now, we've done this. A lot of people are like, wow, how did you do that? But Outlook or whatever scheduling system you're using, if you got some creative software people on your campus, college campuses got all kinds of creative software people, you can, in some cases with your BAS system, link Outlook in this case to your HVAC system to where, you know, if the space is not scheduled, now I'm assuming this space was set up I'm looking, David or Dennis, was this space scheduled for us?
Yes.
Yep. So,
No.
no?
Was it scheduled? No.
Yeah, in Outlook? No.
You're in a 24/7 building.
24/7 building.
This is everything all the time.
Yeah. So, but we know that there's not meetings in here all the time. But this is one creative way. I'm not saying everyone should do this because it's got some challenges. But again, there's different ways to get around having to run 24/7 for sporadic uses. We talked about outdoor temperature interlocks. And again, we're saying 2 to 4 weeks out of the year for extreme weather. It might be 4 to 8 for this location for Maryland. And it can vary year to year. But the real question is, if I don't have some creative way to get around overrides, how many months out of the year are my HVAC systems actually in override? Does anybody track that? I doubt it. So, in fact, if you're like our organization, we find an override and it could have been in place for 3 months. It solved the 2-week cold weather event or the 4-week hot weather event, but now it just kept consuming energy. Optimal start. Are you using it? Does your DDC system have scheduling capability? And does everyone know how it works? So these are all important questions. So this is we'll talk about what we can see with eCam, with trended data. These are some charts. Some of these are made up. Some of these are real from our buildings, some other buildings, BAS systems. So this first chart on the left shows static pressure running about 1 inch. The chart on the right shows static pressure running below 1 inch. And so the question is, this is about 10-day period, May 28th through about June 7th. It may or may not include Memorial Day weekend. Doesn't really matter. We know it goes through weekdays and weekends. But what does this indicate from the standpoint of the fan? Runs 24/7. And over here we can see that it drops down to close to 0, comes up, and then it has a shutdown period. It looks like maybe 6 to 8 hours a day. And that's back in November. And that might be over another holiday period that we call Thanksgiving. So at least it's got a schedule. Whether or not it's following holiday scheduling, we don't know. The left axis here, scale is 0 to 1. 1 is, for most BAA systems, indicates on. And again, we see several days from April 25th to May 3rd. The fan is always on. And on this chart on the bottom, it looks like it's scheduled to shut off every day of the week, including weekends. So again, there's not a weekend setback, but it's better. And here we see we've got a weekend setback. Again, static pressure. Looks like the weekends it's off, and it's running during the week. This one's a little bit different. It's got a Monday through Friday. It looks like it's off on Sunday, but we see an abbreviated Saturday schedule. Is there anything wrong with that? No. In fact, we see a lot of people put abbreviated schedules on the weekends because they know, someone said earlier, Mondays, 3-day weekends are notorious for recovery. So we see a lot of people put in maybe a 6-hour schedule just to maintain that building so they don't, the mass, so it's not as much of an issue trying to recover. Okay, what do we see here? We're running at 2 inches static pressure. According to the axis here, that might be a little bit high, but from a standpoint of whether or not we can see the fan shutting off. What do we see?
Duct.
What's that?
You might have problems with your duct where the fan is located if you're running 2 inches down at the end.
Yeah. So we don't know why it's running at such a high value. We don't know where the static pressure sensor's at. Really what we're focusing on here is what does the data tell us from a standpoint of scheduling? And the only thing that I would point out is what do you see on Wednesdays? Night classes. Well, that could be. But more than likely, this is a legacy where something happened on a Wednesday and we don't go back in time. It could have been a year ago, it could have been a month ago, and someone said, tighten up the schedule for Wednesdays. Could be classes. I'm going to blow by these real quick. Basically, this is trying to show that earlier slide that said, do I see a 5 to 10 degree deviation when I do a setback at the zone level? And as you can see, this zone sensor never changes much between 71 to 74 degrees. So whatever we're doing in this building is not much. Now this one, we see a much more significant change going as high as 80 and then back down to 75. We continue to see this large change at night, which tells us we're doing some kind of setback. Okay, so you guys didn't know you're going to have a test. So put on your hats, thinking caps. This is another college campus. I've given you a lot of information already about this particular situation. So hopefully we'll have some interesting answers. There's no wrong answers, by the way, although we give what we think is the best answer, but that's okay. This is for an air handling unit. And the chart there is through the weekend, Saturday through Sunday. So it's about a 48-hour period. The orange line, I don't know if you can see it very well with the lighting in here. Orange line is the chill water valve command. The green line is the economizer damper. The outside air temperature is the blue line. We're seeing temperatures drop down at night around 50 up to about 80, 85 during the day. And the red line is your return air temperature. And then that second bullet tells you some of the action with the dampers and cooling valves. They're basically active almost all day. There's only about 6 to 8 hours where they're reduced. And I'll tell you this much, which I thought was in our slide. Oh yeah, there it is, the third bullet. It's serving an auditorium. Okay, so we talked about auditoriums earlier. Notorious for running 24/7 or almost 24/7, lightly occupied. So what can we do about this? We see a lot of outdoor air economizer. We see a lot of cooling going on. The fan's obviously running.
Based it on CO2, I mean, that's a big thing.
Okay.
If CO2's down, why bring in outside air?
Okay.
I mean, that's,
Now, would you also base the fan operation on CO2, or would you shut it off?
you base fan on occupancy.
Okay.
I mean, if you know what your schedule is, but a big thing is close outdoor air dampers. I mean, only bringing outdoor air for CO2 gets above, 1,000 or 950.
When we asked them why the schedule, they said, we run it, again, just in case. We run it just in case. And we see this, I don't know about Towson or other university organizations that are represented here, but maybe this could be one of your buildings, one of your auditoriums as well.
Are we assuming that's supposed to be occupied or something like that?
Yes, yeah. Yep.
On a weekend?
Yep, on a weekend. Yep. Saturday, we don't even show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This is just Saturday, Sunday. It's May.
It looks like you may be doing the economizer and chill water valve at the same time, which, the red line, the green, is that, no?
Yeah, green line is your economizer, goes up to almost 100%, and we have cooling now. We generally emphasize doing integrated economizer and, so a lot of people, they set up their economizers and their cooling valves. So once my economizer, if my economizer is operating, then I'll limit my cooling valve, or I'll limit it until I get maximum before I let my economizer go active. So some people set up their cooling valves. Once I go to minimum, then I'm going to let my cooling valve go active. I'm not sure how you guys do economizing and cooling here on the East Coast.
Some enthalpy, and try to do enthalpy if we have a capability.
So if the enthalpy says it's more economical to bring in outside air, and the outside air is not allowing you to meet your target temperature discharge, and then I got to invoke mechanical cooling, do I still bring in outside air, or do I go back to return air?
Sure, because there's less BTUs in outdoor air.
Right.
So I mean, heat.
Because what we see in some control vendor algorithms is once my mechanical cooling valve goes open, irregardless of what the enthalpy says, we're going back to return air. So, okay, is the schedule for this air handling system appropriate? Well, it's an educational institution. Is this space likely occupied every weekend?
Well, not only that, but it's not occupied 24 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, there should be some setbacks somewhere.
Yeah. So, okay, so that brings us to the last bullet. We've heard setbacks, limit the economizer. So we're basically saying the correct answer or a good answer would be to eliminate or reduce the weekend schedule. Maybe we can run it for 6 hours a day just to keep the temperatures from getting too far away from what they want. Or provide a method to activate occupancy for 2 to 4 hours. Maybe they just need some button in there where we always are unoccupied, but we let the temperatures only float up to 78 or down to 68, some reasonable value. And then the admin or whoever is responsible for setting up the space, they can come in and activate some override button. That's a low cost. It's not a no cost, but it's compared to the way we're currently operating, it's going to pay for itself in short order.